their messaging and their company culture as well.
Yeah, I agree with that. Oh, yeah, this is tough because I think we saw some really wonderful things happen this summer with the community coming together to fundraise, not just on the industry side, but like content creators and consumers. Like on all fronts, we saw people starting to become more vocal, starting to put their money towards like games in the industry that have been made by Black developers or BIPOC developers. We saw more of this recognition happen. My hope is that this continues, but I hate to be the salty person.
No,
but
bring it on.
I can see changes happening so slowly, so slowly. And I do know that they are happening, and I do know that there are so many folks in the industry really fighting to get things to where they should be, where we have equity and representation and all of this good stuff. And more so maybe because I'm in the indie space, I do see it in the indie space. But my concern and my skeptic brain is already seeing the events of the summer start to wane, and things, in a sense, returning to that status quo that we had prior to George Floyd and prior to a lot of the outrage that happened surrounding his murder. So I'm hoping that I 100% agree with Chris. I'm hoping that we continue to find ways to gradually move that needle and to make things happen. But I just also wish that there are ways that we could make it happen a little faster, and that we could do that. But that's, I think, that's a whole hour-long podcast in and of itself.
Well, no, I would. I would.
You're still there?
Oh, I'm sorry, Andrew. You got it.
No, I thought you were sorry.
Oh no, good.
Okay. I would just say, Jenny, I'm glad you said that, because I was feeling basically the same thing you are in terms of just things are kind of waning and whatnot, and to a degree. And I mean, you can kind of understand that, right? Because in the heat of the moment type things, it's going to be really top of mind, and then people, move forward with that. But in time, I mean, and you can kind of understand it. And I think I'm not trying to say this hope I'm saying this correctly or how I want it to come out, but each person or group of people as a whole, they kind of, everybody's or everybody or every entity to some degree is kind of all in their own little world, right? And if they don't properly think about these things and looking at ways to invest into it further and bringing, as Chris mentioned, bringing it into their own culture and things like that, I think that's where we're going to fall off with that. And what I like to, and I am going to do a quick call out to a previous episode of ours with Decoy Games. It was episode 135. It was with a brother team, Khalil and Ahmed well, one of their focuses, and I think this is a great way to start within their community and everything else, is they understand from a colored perspective, not just from games as a whole, but just in society as well, what they found, and this is their own little mission outside of, obviously making games, but it comes down to representation and building confidence within these, within different cultural groups and such. Whatever the group is, and they're saying, and which I'm a firm believer too, is getting the representation and building up the confidence. And if people then continue to practice this and have that focus, and again incorporate it into their own mission, into their own philosophy, culture, whatever you have, then you're going to start seeing more of it. But I think what's important in all of this that we're talking about is having that consistency continue to go on, and not just have it be a boiling point that has these movements occur. Just really accept it, because their ultimate goal, and I love this about them too, their goal is it's not about having more colored people into the industry or anything else like that. It's more of just making it the norm. So you're not saying, oh, there's more colored people in this group in this company. It's there's people in this company, and that's their outlook. And I'm like, that's exactly how we need to approach it. But still, like you said, and everything else, it's a process of getting there. It's more of having that consistency and that adaptation of it, but the consistency of having that conversation. So it doesn't take a significant, event to make it happen. It's always happening and moving there. But I think we're going in the right direction for sure.
All right. I want to dive in here for a second, just kind of also follow up on the comment that you'd made, Jenny, about waning interest as well, because I think it's such an important. It's so commonplace, I think, in games, the discourse around like the presence of social or political issues at all. To wonder whether or not it belongs here, right? This is a means of entertainment, and so like a lot of people feel that these things are divorced from one another. And I think it's so important to like acknowledge, I think, from kind of an inside looking out perspective, that when certain social issues are the topic of conversation in the space of any creative medium, the individuals who are most impacted by that dialogue are almost not able to kind of disconnect from it and treat the medium or the hobby or the career as something separate from politics. It's all intertwined for people who kind of live it every day. And I think like, and I appreciate so much of you mentioning that, because like while there is a positive to the things that we're starting to see happen in way of change, in way of people's willingness to have even conversations about this, there is kind of an importance to making sure that we're approaching it earnestly and with the perspectives of people who are impacted by it, and not necessarily kind of, holding on to it as long as it's the number one trender on Twitter for that week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I want to like clarify a little bit, because now I'm thinking about it, my gears are turning. Like, I do understand that like it's not sustainable, the outrage that we felt back in like the spring and the summer. Like I understand 100% to sustain that kind of emotional activity is exhausting, and it's 2020 and we are all exhausted at this point. But what I would love for the industry, not just indies, but triple A's, and everyone in between, to do is find ways that hopefully in the future we can embed this in daily practices, right, and not have to have it be those bursts of outrage, because this is something already embedded in the way the industry works. So elevating developers of color, like funding prototypes, so folks who don't have the means to create a prototype because they don't have maybe some of the advantages that maybe other studios have or whatnot, like funding those prototypes so that they can happen and people can explore ideas. And things are happening, like I think Humble had a fund that they announced and are starting to announce grantees for particularly Black developers. Game Devs of Color is an incredible event that happens every July that is all about representation. And I think the Fairchild Initiative through Kowloon Knights is happening. So stuff is there, but it's just what I worry about is they're all in their own pockets. It's like it's all of the people of color are talking to all the people of color, and like all of them marginalized. Like we're sort of in this island, and there has to be some way that crosses into like being embedded and threaded throughout the entire culture of the industry. And I hope that's what happens in the future, because I do understand like we can't have a justice bundle every month that does what it does, because that's not sustainable. But yeah, so it's a huge conversation, but yeah.
No, that's an excellent point. And to kind of call back to, and I think this is one of the reasons why I think having positive, influential people in our industry gaining such like career traction and recognition is so exceptional. Like you spoke specifically on the the game devs of color. I know we had back in June, Victoria Tran was on the show with us and kind of had an episode discussing all of this and kind of her involvement with the influential sides of things, and having seen, I know she was with Kit Fox then, and they're doing exceptional work on that front, and now she's with Innersloth, and kind of seeing people in our industry gaining more of that kind of recognition in the game space, and just hoping that as we kind of go into these positions with our values and are becoming more recognizable people who are able to kind of carry these messages, that it kind of coincides with that expanding presence of indies over against AAAs, and that those values kind of grow in the same way that our successes do.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's a great example. Like Victoria taking a lot of those like values and just being the amazing person that she is, and like knowing that she will help bring that to Among Us, which has a huge audience. I think stuff like that is what we would love to see. You'll love to see it.
Yes. Well said.
Yeah. I think Victoria is a phenomenal example. And jumping back to the best Twitter moments, her and the Innersloth team winning the Game Awards.
Gosh, yeah. Phone lady.
Such a wholesome experience. Wow. It was beautiful.
I just adore the static imagery of like them on the webcam and then her on the phone being held up. It was very, very
cool. Seeing people saying phone lady for Smash like made my year.
I missed that. Wow, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
What I wanted to add on that front, I think it's phenomenal that people like Victoria, but also lots of other initiatives from sort of the indie space are doing so much good for the industry and are holding all of us up to a higher standard. But it's super important to also see the change happening from sort of the corporate level, not only waiting for people from the ground up to push for these changes. And a big part of that, especially in the AAA space, is making larger companies understand that up until now, it may not have hurt them too much if they just ignored these important topics, but making it hurt where it really hurts, which is their financial gains at the end of the day. Yeah. The consumers play a massive part of how this industry is dictated, and educating the consumers to understand what standards are that all of us in this industry are striving for, and having them be part of the bigger picture to push massive corporations to these standards. Up to these standards, hopefully going to have another long-term effect across this entire industry, rather than just, as it well put, the multiple great but unfortunately split up initiatives right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, definitely. I think even to give kind of a more specific example of that, I think like of all the companies that I've seen that I feel like have definitely been pushed to change their approach to social presence, Sony definitely comes to mind. I think a lot of their response surrounding the events of this summer struck me as being far more actionable items than a lot of the other cohort, so to speak, and even seeing the lasting impacts of that on the games that have been really kind of gaining the most attention on the PS5 being a new platform, with something like Spider-Man Miles Morales being a big headliner for the console, and even a lot of the the smaller games. And I can't believe I'm struggling to remember, but they had one at kind of their big PS5 reveal event that was like monsters in a high school, and
co-op game. Oh shoot, I'm blanking on the title.
I promise one of us will blurt it out as soon as we remember
it. Goodbye Volcano High?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you, Chris. And thinking back to like even when the PS4 was announced, if direct style presentations were happening then, I don't think a game like that would have been able to have been shown and promoted in such a positive way. And it's important. I think like something like that even speaks to kind of the strides that we're making in diversity of content as well as diversity of people making content. So, you know, it's exceptional to see that even happening, you know, in that AAA space.